Hey, everybody, welcome to the Art of Transformation. I am your host, Mark Scheff, and today I always say that I had a great conversation, but this one is a little bit different because I got to talk with someone who is an expert at some stuff that I love doing in my life and I don't talk about a lot. I'd like to tell people that I'm a little bit woo-woo. I'm like woo, not totally woo-woo. And we get to talk about some of the processes and practices that I've done that she's an expert at. And we also got to talk about how this actually works in your life. Diamond Drip is my guest today, and she's an expert on human design, gene keys, coaching, creativity, and a lot more. Please enjoy this episode, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Art of Transformation podcast. I'm your host, Mark Scheff, and I'm here with Coach Diamond Drip. And I am very, very excited because when Coach Diamond Drip reached out to me and she was telling me about all the stuff that she's doing, it's stuff that I've kind of done in the background and I don't talk about a lot in my coaching and the content that I put out there. So I'm excited to actually get to share some of that today and hear from Diamond Drip about how she used that stuff. So Diamond, welcome.
Hey, Mark, it's so good to be here with you and our listeners. Like you, I'm also excited.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that really excited me, and I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about your background with this, but, I know that you, it's funny. I know that you work with human design. I've had my own reading done. It was very impactful. Love to share that story at some point. And also gene keys, which I don't know as much about, but I have listened to, and I forget the guy who started it. What's his name?
Richard Rudd.
Richard Rudd, right? So I took one of his courses, and I actually listened to some of the audio that they put out around the gene keys is really just inspiring. I don't know a whole lot about it, so I'd love to find out more. So how did you get to this place where you're focused on this kind of work?
Yeah, absolutely. Which course did you take, by the way? Is it activation?
It was like a 7-day kind of thing.
Okay. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
I feel under researched now because I should have gone and looked that up before, but I did it, and it was very grounding and very impactful.
I know which one you did. I'm always curious. I'm like, how deep did you go?
Yeah, pretty shallow. But again, I was doing different kinds of therapy. This is some years ago, and some of the audio that we do with the therapy, and this, I think this might have in particular been ketamine therapy. And so some of the audio that we were listening to was Richard Rudd, and there was like music behind it, and there was just like these incredible, inspiring sort of narratives, and really at the end, really had me feeling like more capable and like more was possible, and that my life was on track. Nothing had changed except for I listened to this audio, but I just felt different.
I love that. Okay, so to answer your question,
how did you get here? How did you get here?
Yes, how I got to these tools. So I love that you brought up ketamine because I participated in a psilocybin clinical trial that
Okay.
actually healed my depression. And I say
Amazing.
that was the catalyst for this whole spiritual, because I was one of those people who I would read my horoscope and I'd be like, that kind of fits. I see why people like this. But then there would just be these elements that didn't fit or didn't quite feel like me. And so I would just write it off. I'd be like, people believe in this wholeheartedly. Like, I don't like. And the trial changed that for me because it took me and connected me to my higher self. It kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And I was a little bit less closed off to this idea that we are these souls having this human experience, and that things like the planets moving around can actually have an impact on us and our personality. And they always say that when you do a psilocybin experience or any psychedelic experience, don't make any major changes in your life for like 6 months.
Absolutely. No, and I also want to say, like, and I said this before, before we started recording, but I consider myself like sort of a spiritual skeptic, like not woo woo, but like woo, like it's like partially there. And I know for anybody who's listening, who's like, oh, we're talking about planets and whatever, this is BS. Keep listening, because I believe that, whether or not you wholeheartedly believe that because Mars moved over here, like you're going to be sad today, it doesn't matter. It's a foundation for inquiry. And that's what I'm hearing you say right now, right? Is like you had this experience and it was a foundation for deep inquiry that changed your life.
Absolutely. Yes. And I love that beautiful encapsulation of what what happened. So I've been an entrepreneur for 4 years. This trial happened about 2 years in.
Okay.
And like I said, they tell you don't do anything major for 6 months. And so at the time of the trial, I had my main business, which was a product based business. It was the thing that was bringing me money. I was also in school for visual communications. My degree is in graphic design. So with the confidence that I was gaining from learning these tools in school, I started a
Yeah.
side business, a side graphic design business. So two businesses, a student, and my daughter was 3 at the time. So a
Oh, good
toddler.
Lord. Oh, good Lord. You're
So
in the
you can
weeds.
see
I mean,
where I'm going.
my kids are a little older now, and I'm still like, I was just talking to my wife, and we're at the point now where like mostly things are under control. So when stuff does happen, we're like, oh man, we thought this was under control, and 3 years old, nothing's under control. Like it's like a fire hose all the time. And seeing you were dealing with two businesses and school. So how are you managing?
And that was the wake up call. The trial was,
Okay.
I was operating out of the shoulds and the have tos and forcing myself and
Okay.
trying to prove, like trying to let these labels like, oh, you're a multi-business owner and a student and a mom. Like you're so successful. You're doing so much, and letting these things like define me, even though they were draining me. And
Yeah.
it was one of those things where the trial was like, wait, you didn't start a business to be a slave to these businesses. Like, what are we doing? Your daughter, you're like, there's connection potential there. And so, like, for context, I try to be the opposite of what my mom was. My mom was undiagnosed borderline personality disorder with narcissistic tendencies, and I was removed from her care due to child abuse and neglect when I was 14.
Okay.
And so
Sorry.
that showed me what not to be as a parent. And I thought that I was doing a great job because I wasn't that. But in
Mm.
a lot of ways, my daughter in the trial showed me this, that she just wanted to play with me. Like at the end of the day, she just wanted to play. She wanted to spend time. And even though I wasn't abusing her, I was still not giving her the time that even I wanted as a child from my mom. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the openings. So all of this came from the trial. And so I waited, I listened to them.
Okay.
And I said,
Hard.
okay, I'm not going to make any major decisions for 6 months. So about 7 or 8 months after the trial, I made the decision to close down my first business because I realized that the lifestyle that I envisioned for myself, being able to move freely and go to these different places and just hop
Mm-hmm.
on a computer, that product-based business wasn't allowing me to do that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, what do I like from both businesses? In the product-based business, I was doing some element of life coaching because I wanted to get to the root of people's problems so I could make the right product recommendation. In the
Right.
graphic design business, the business owners who would come to me for logos and websites and social media posts. But what was really happening was branding coaching and marketing strategy
Which
behind
is
the
a lot about
scenes.
identity, right? It's identity work,
Yes.
right? At the end of
And
the
so
day, like, who are you and how do we represent that over here? But we need to know who you are first, right?
exactly. Otherwise, we're going to create things that as you grow and evolve, you're going to be like, that doesn't fit me anymore. And then these major rebrands happen. When if you're aligned at first, you don't have to change. It can grow with you. So in both of these scenarios, I was doing this element of coaching for free.
Mm.
Um, right? And doing the
First,
work.
yeah, I hear that. What's that
And
like?
so I looked at it and I was like, okay, well, since I love that part, why are you not doing that? Like, why are you having these other things? And so I made the decision to close down my first business and to take a stab at becoming a service-based business with this coaching element at the forefront. And so naturally, I realized very quickly that I had no idea how to do that because I had built a product-based business. And I was like, okay, I do know about customer service, but obviously there's more to a service-based business than just customer service. So out of that feeling of inadequacy, I joined a year-long coaching program that was, right, we see them all the time. Learn this proven strategy and
Sure.
framework,
Yeah.
and you'll make 10K, you'll have $100,000 launches. And what
Right.
happened was I joined the program, I learned those things, and I saw other people having all this success. And I was like, well, what am I doing wrong? Like, I'm doing it. People are coming to my stuff and they're like, you're great. And I'm like,
Okay, so
okay.
this is really, I want, for any, I want you to bookmark this moment because this is a big question, right? Like I work with a lot of different kinds of folks, a lot of creatives and a lot of different kinds of folks. And what I've discovered is like a lot of folks know exactly what it is that they need to do. They know these systems, they can pay for this framework, they can pay for these templates, all this stuff. So what is it that was separating you in that moment from these other people who are seeing that success?
And what it ultimately came down to was what I thought of myself, the stories that I was telling myself. Like, I would be able to put on these great events and get people on discovery calls. But then, because the program that I was in, it taught the framework of doing this funnel in order to get people into a high ticket program. And the
Hmm.
problem with having a high ticket program as a coach is that you have to believe in yourself and your ability. You have to believe that you're worthy of the price that you're charging people.
Right,
And if
right,
you don't, that shows up in sales conversations.
right.
It's like, yeah, this sounds great, but I don't know, right? Like, you create that kind of, I don't know, for them. And then they either say, I need to think about it, or I don't think this is the right fit for me right now, or any of those things that we hear as
I've heard
rejection.
them all. I've heard them all. Yeah.
And so,
I think also I'll just say like I think again for anybody listening who's doing anything, whether it's creative coaching, doesn't matter. Like, um, you'll hear all those things, and you should hear all those things if you're putting yourself, out there in a really truly like, in a way that's really authentic to you, in a way that you're really like, pushing yourself to live your values and actually putting your work out there and making your offers. And yeah, you should hear all those things. You should, you should absolutely get is like a ton of no's and no thank yous, and I got to think about it, and I got to ask my partner and all that stuff.
yeah, yes.
Yeah,
So I want to validate that as well. Yes,
yeah.
because we are not for everyone. So I was in this, and the whole time they're talking about niche clarity, right? They teach a framework, but then they try and tie in these other business elements of like, what's your superpower? What's your unique value proposition? Like, how are you
Hmm.
standing out? What's your message? What's your mission? And so I was in this place of, on a personal level, I had come into contact with my higher consciousness. Whatever my higher self was, I saw her, I met her, I saw how she operated, how she flowed. She was empathetic, she was kind to herself, she was forgiving. Like, I was like, I want to be more like her. How do I get there? Like, she seems awesome and at peace. And not worried about anything.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was trying to figure out, how do I become her? And then at the same time, I was figuring out, like, okay, I have this service-based business and I know I'm doing the right things, but I think the thing is my confidence. Like, how can I figure out what my thing is that makes me special from all the other business and mindset coaches that are out there
Hmm.
talking about AI, talking about mindset? Like, what makes me different? And at a time where I really needed it, someone was like, do you know your energy type? And I was like, no, right? Another thing, right? No,
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. And she sent me a calculator that was not like the one that's on my website now. They just give you the word, no description. And so
Okay.
I'm not buying a report for something I don't know anything about. Like, no. So what do we usually do? I went to YouTube University and I was like, what does it mean to be a generator in human design? And immediately, like, my whole life, people told me, like, your energy is infectious, it's contagious, like, you bring energy. And I was watching this video and it was saying, like, when you're doing work that you love, when you're around people that energize you, when you're in the right places, like, you generate so much energy that it literally bubbles up and spills out of you into the work that you're doing, the people you're around. And that's why people want you around. Like, they want you to bring that energy. And I was like, oh, that's me. Like, that's what people are describing. And then
Hmm.
I looked up, what does it mean to have emotional authority? And I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder when I was 14. And so when disorder, there's a negative connotation. It means there's
Right.
something
Something
wrong
out
with
of
you,
order. Yeah, yeah.
right? Yes. And
Order
so,
being good. Sure.
right? Normal.
Uh-huh.
um, and so in human design, I have what's called emotional authority, which is this acknowledgement that I live my life in these up and down waves. But that's actually aligned for me. And it's when I'm in an emotionally neutral place that I make my best decisions. Not
Mm.
from a high, not from a low, but from
Hmm.
this neutral place, taking time. And so that was empowering. And I was like, okay, this changes the narrative. I don't know how really how to start using this, right? At this time, I'm like doing research, but I was like, this changes the way that this thing that I know about myself, it changes the way that I think about it. And then the last thing that I'll talk about is the 5-1 profile. And as a one line, you learn that you're an investigator, you're a researcher, you like getting to the bottom of things, you like a strong foundation of information. And I was like, isn't that the cat calling the kettle black? Like right
Yeah.
now, like this
Yeah.
is what I'm doing. I'm deep in a rabbit hole, getting information and doing
You're
research.
doing it right in that moment. Yeah, I found. Thank you for sharing all that. First of all, there's a lot to sort of dig into there, and I resonate with a lot of it. I've had some similar experiences growing up, and uh, what I found so interesting when I had my human design done by a practitioner. Uh, there was there's like this whole report that you get, and obviously if you're doing the readings for people, you're with them and you're helping them interpret the report. But I actually had a very in a way like a very similar, not overall result, because I don't know, I'm an emotional manifester. That's my type. And what I discovered, it's like so specific and so weird, but it made such a huge difference in my life when I had that done, about a year ago, is how important sleep is for my decision making, and not just sleep and being rested, but the time that it takes to sleep. So I'm an emotional manifester. I'm the guy. Someone's like, hey, let's do that. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And I get inevitably overwhelmed, overcommitted, and that's a big pattern in my life. And when I started to really look at how I'm making decisions and the time I'm really giving myself to make decisions and how much sleep I'm getting in between getting the idea and saying yes, I have drastically balanced out my life since I had that reading done. I've been doing a lot of work, and it's not just like, okay, human design is magic and it fixes everything. But the thing that I'm up against too is like these fears of changing, or these fears of sort of disappointing other people. If someone says, hey, I've got this offer for you, and this happens a lot in our world, right? Like LinkedIn, everyone's like, I want to help you, I want to do your newsletter, I want to 10x your like all this stuff. And I've just gotten really good at being like, I'd love to think about it. And you really get to know like if it's the right decision when you see the responses to that. Obviously some people are very persistent. Some people you're like, well, no, you got to decide now. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not how I make decisions. So if you're already telling me that you're not respecting my process, then we aren't a good fit. And it's been liberating, like absolutely liberating, how much crap I've said no to in the last year.
Yeah.
Have you had that experience since you said you got when did you have your reading done? When did you learn your type?
So when I learned my type and when I had my reading done, two different things.
Okay. Okay.
Because I went down the rabbit hole and I was learning all these things, but then I was running up against the block that you will run into, in the beginning of, okay, now I know all this stuff about myself, but how do I use it? And it
Okay.
was at that point that I was like, all right, let me get one of these readings so I can see how someone else does it. How do they talk about the information? And I just, the reading helped me make sense of how to, like, because a lot of the things that I was learning, it was in the human design language, which isn't always digestible in
No.
traditional human design.
No, I mean, honestly, even some of the stuff you say, you're like, I'm a one line. People are like, what does that even
Yeah.
mean? And that's why. And I'll say, like, that is why someone needs to work with someone like you who understands these things. So someone's not just sitting there using all this tribal language that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything until someone's like, actually, what it means is you need to sleep more. Like, actually, what it means is, you need to take breaks during your day, or like whatever it is. Because in my experience, and even in talking to you, like if you're actually coaching with someone, you're getting, like you said, you like to dig into it with people, you like to get to know them, and then when you have this reading, you can say, okay, so what I know about you and what I'm seeing here, now we're in inquiry.
Yeah.
Now we're discovering together. Well, how does this line up? What are the options for you? What was that for you? What was that experience like for you?
It was really profound. So the person who did my reading, I had watched a lot of her YouTube videos
Mm.
because she was talking about it before people were even talking about it. So I was just fangirling over the fact that the person who I was literally just watching, I'm like, ah, there you are doing my thing. So, aside from that, just getting clarity around like why my energy works the way that it does. Like when you talk about being emotional, I want it, and that's when I had my reading, because I knew so much already. Like a lot of people, they go into readings because they don't know. They're like, tell me.
Yeah.
And I went in like, okay, I know this stuff. Tell me how to make it work. And like you said, human design is like a tool. Like it's not the answer. So she's telling me things and I'm like, yeah, that validates that. And I know that's important, but like also, how do I start using this emotional authority thing? And she was a splenic projector or a self-projected projector.
Hmm.
So like it's different energy. So she can't tell me how to be emotional because she hasn't experienced that. She can tell me what other clients have gone through. And so for me, it was one of those things of like validation of like, okay, I know the things that I need to know, but I'm still kind of left with like, how do I make this actionable in a way? And when we talk about like having emotional authority, I am so glad and I am super excited for when this comes out because I was literally just talking to an emotional manifester and she would say like I inform, I do things, and I'm like, but when the decision was like something that really was something for her, she's like, I don't need to tell anyone, I can just tell them after. I'm like, it's exactly where you need to inform. It's like but dealing with the emotional waves, like you start to get in your awareness around what is coming up. And that was the biggest thing for me with the reading and learning and more about emotional authority was like how you say that you need sleep. Like I recognize that as well. But for me, I realized how much I wasn't even listening to my sacral response. So as a generator, I have this internal And so what I was noticing was the mind would kick in so quickly after I would get the or and then I would be noodling on like what I thought was the right decision. So it took me a really long time to figure out what was external noise, what was the
Mm.
internal critic, and what stuff I was noodling on from that, and what stuff was actually aligned. And one of the things that I found really helpful was that when your authority, well, I start with conditioning. When conditioning is behind whatever the decision you're making is, there's this pressure, there's this urgency of like, you have to, you must, you should. But when something is actually aligned for you, it's this feels good.
Yeah,
This
you've mentioned
is in
you,
alignment.
you've used some language that I want to thread together here, like the shoulds, the have tos. You know, in plain terms, I think we're just talking about pressure from family, from society, from constructs around gender and race and all these different things, and uh, that's been really eye opening for me as well. Like just really looking at like I've got kids too, and there's so many times when it's like, okay, what should we do? And it's like, well, we should hold on a second, how do we actually want to do it? What, like, if we're really in touch with, and I do some different work around inner critic and other things, but like coming down to like what are our most, and you keep using the word aligned. I use that word, like what would feel most aligned with me, to in this moment with my child, or planning their school, or whatever it is, and that takes, I think it takes this kind of um, thoughtful and non-rushed inquiry. If you, I mean, again, that's there's certain maybe we don't all have that choice to slow things down. Sometimes life does force you into faster decisions. Um, but I also want to ask you about how this relates to your work with the gene keys, and
Yeah.
actually just help our listeners understand what is it. Actually, let's be honest. Let's help me understand what it is, because I've only dipped a little bit into that.
Yes, absolutely. So I always preface whenever I talk about gene keys with human design. So human design is a synthesis of a bunch of different sciences that give you this map, this blueprint of how your energy flows, different aspects of your personality, and how that ties into your decision making. Of those sciences, there's at least 7 or 8. Gene keys look specifically at a couple of them. So the Chinese I Ching and quantum physics. So every gate in human design, every gift in human design is actually also a gene key. Like
Mm,
they're talking about the same thing.
okay.
Where the gene keys goes a little bit deeper is there's a shadow, a gift, and a city. And a city is like a Sanskrit word for like this transcendent realization. And so the shadow is whatever the challenge is that you need to surmount or overcome in order to see the creative potential of the gift, the gate that you actually have.
And so
And
what is
then,
an example of the gift? So the
yes,
shadow is the problem, the gift is
yes. So I always, right, we're our best example. So what I'm here to do in this lifetime, one of my most important gifts is the gate of beginnings. It's gate 53. And the shadow is immaturity. And so, like you said, there's this curiosity that you have to have with these tools. Because when I first learned that, I was like, I'm like the most mature person I know. Like I was in the system, right? Like, and so you have to kind of sit with yourself and see what comes up. But when you listen to, like you said, the contemplations, he talks about how immaturity is actually being in this place where you're so externally fixated. You're
mm,
constantly seeking validation and
mm,
moving from that into this place of internal groundedness. Like that's what the shadow of immaturity is. And I right, when I listened to the contemplation, I was like, I guess that's me. I'm definitely a perfectionist. Like, and
yeah.
the school system doesn't help. Like, it's literally our whole lives are trained of like, do this work and then turn it in for a grade and then let someone else tell you, is it an A? Is it a B? And so you develop that kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the shadow. The gift is expansion, which makes sense because if you're not holding yourself back, trying to get external validation all the time, then you are going to expand more. You're going to step into things more. And when you do that, the city for this particular gene key is super abundance. Now, that one definitely had a reaction too, because at that time, I was still in the business coaching program and I'm seeing all these people hit 6 figures and 5 figure launches. And I'm like, I don't feel abundant. So
It's a
super
comparison trap,
abundance,
right? I'm not as abundant as them, and so I'm not abundant. Yeah.
right?
Right.
Right. So not thinking that you're abundant and then to see that super abundance is the city, it's like, well, what's super abundance like? And one of the things that I found in and I love podcasts because this actually came through in a podcast. Like there's multiple types of abundance. There's time abundance, there's health, there's, relationship, there's financial, but there's all of these different components. And when we release or when we change our perspective and we release the stories that we tell ourselves about abundance, you actually start to see like, oh, when I do expand in these ways, like I'm stepping into that super abundance. I'm seeing this transcendent realization. So that's kind of like how the gene keys work. Each one that you have, um, it has these 3 different levels, and there are kind of 3 pathways in gene keys. That's why I asked which course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's the first one, which is the activation sequence, which talks all about like your purpose and what you're here to do, what you're here to learn, what deeply fulfills you, what keeps you healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the second path, and this is the recommended order, by the way, because the third one a lot of people want to jump into, but I'll explain why I don't do that. Uh, so the second one, which I'm actually in right now, is the Venus sequence, and so that looks at your relationship with other people. So it picks up from where you left off in the activation with your purpose, with what deeply fulfills you.
Yeah. Why are you
And
here? Yeah.
exactly, it starts there. And then you start looking at these different relationship dynamics, karma, dharma, emotional intelligence, SQ, like all of these things are in the Venus sequence. And then the third one, which is the prosperity one, which is why obviously a lot of people want to
Right,
do that
right.
one first.
Let's just skip to
Uh,
that.
right? How do I make the money? But that one, it comes last because until you truly understand your purpose and your gifts and how they play into your purpose, and you understand how you are in relationship with people to help you fulfill your purpose, you can't focus on the money and the communication of it because you don't know.
Yeah,
So those are
I've
the three
seen it.
paths.
I've seen it. I mean, just with myself and with a lot of the folks I work with. There is this focus in this world, in our society, around like we've talked about it, 10x your income, get 1,000 clients, like all or sell 1 million paintings, whatever it is. Um, and at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who are doing that who are deeply unhappy because they haven't done the purpose work. And I know and again, just like for anybody who's listening who knows me, like I know it sounds kind of woo woo, but fundamentally, like if you're just out there chasing you know these dreams that may belong to somebody else, or a lot belong to other people, then even if you get them, like it's not going to make you happy. So honestly, like what's the point? And when I see people really connecting with, and I use the word gifts slightly I'm using it in a different context, which is just like the gifts that you have to give the world. And if you can connect with those, and I heard you say that, and I had a very similar experience when it came to coaching, because I was doing my own, work and running my own businesses, and I still have at least one of those businesses. But, when I really thought about like what is the pattern in the pattern of my life and all the things that I've done and the specific memories and things that I have, like where did I feel most fulfilled and most kind of lit up in a way? Like where was I, or if you just want to think about some non-woo terms, like where was I happiest? What moments in my life? And when I could write all those things down and connect those dots, I could see what, much more clearly, and dive in with much more rigor around my business, even when I said, okay, actually this is really aligned, as opposed to like, let me try that. Someone says I should do this and I'll try that and see if I can make some money. I'll try that. I'll see if I can make some money. As opposed to like, I believe in this work, which is a much more powerful place to come from in terms of your own fulfillment and success.
Absolutely. And you know what's funny is I actually did a workshop earlier today. And I'm using the same things that I was learning in that business coaching program. The
Mhm.
difference now is
Yeah.
that whereas I picked a niche for now and I was just going with it for the sake of the program, I actually have done the work and I full heartedly believe, and I'm getting different results now. So it really does. It starts with
Well, you
that
said it, that
purpose
self-belief.
clarity. Yeah.
That self-belief that you have, that new story that you're telling yourself about what's possible. And again, like I know how it sounds, because again, like when I hear this with a little bit of like, oh, that sounds a little, but it does work. I really believe that, because I've seen it with myself. I've seen it with other people. Um, it's funny. Have you ever had it work? Like, have you ever seen it work with people who like weren't really even aware that it was happening for them? Yeah.
All the time with specifically with a lot of non-energies. So in traditional human design they say generators and manifesting generators, and if you don't know what you are, I highly recommend pulling your chart on my site. I'm sure that will be linked somewhere.
We will
But man
definitely link to your site. You've got a great, you've got a great kind of, just go ahead and do it yourself.
thank you.
Get a sense. Yeah, I will definitely will send people there. Yeah.
But manifesting generators and generators, we're like the Energizer bunnies. We're just going and going and going. And we make up a lot of the population, like 70% combined. But then you have in traditional human design, they call them non-energy types because they don't have that same sacral battery that we do. So manifestors, reflectors, and projectors. And so all of the conditioning, a lot of the conditioning, not all, but a lot of the conditioning that we're exposed to is actually geared towards generators. Like go out there, make it happen, hustle, grind. And so these projectors, we as generators and manifest generators, we're living out of alignment because we shouldn't be initiating things anyway. We should be like waiting to respond and doing these things to like have things. So what happens with the waiting to response as a generator? I'll give a perfect example.
Hmm.
I went to a webinar and they were talking about human design Black Friday specials. And I was like, oh, yeah, I am a business. I should probably do a Black Friday special. And so I'm getting all these ideas and inspiration and like all of this. And then I recognized that that was going to take me away from the work that I was already doing, the workshops that I was already putting on, the community that I was building. And I was like, wait, hold on. Like, no, I'm feeling pressure to do this, but I don't think this is actually the right move. And so I had to sit with myself and I'd be like, okay, I want to do Black Friday and I got a lot of great ideas. However, I'm going to just write that off for maybe next year. And I just put it away. I get an email like 2 weeks ago from somebody in my network, and she's like, hey, I'm feeling really good right now. I'm feeling really like basically generous. And so she wanted to see who in her network would want to be on this newsletter with Black Friday specials that she was going to send out. And I was like, oh, so I don't have to put together a whole idea of what I'm going to run. I just got to figure out like, and so like that, I had the idea. I had through emotional authority. I waited because I was like, I don't think this is it. I don't think I have the energy for that. And then this other opportunity, similar from that idea, comes and I'm like, ooh, yes. And then I didn't have to create anything because actually what I'm starting to do with human design more is to actually use AI to give my sacral something to respond to. Of like, if it comes back with something like, no. If it comes back with something like, oh yeah, that actually kind of works. And one of the things when I was just like brainstorming, it was like, call the rate that you're charging for your community, just say that's the founding member rate. And that's your Black Friday special. And I was like, you know what? The price is going to go up at some point. So yeah, actually, that's... And so it's having this validate outside of you that it's the right move.
Yeah, I'm looking at the clock and wow, the time
know,
just
right?
flew by. But I had a question that I asked this question in different forms to different guests. I'm curious, before we unfortunately have to go, is what advice do you need to give yourself in the next few months, your future self that's going to live these next few months? What advice do you need to give yourself that you kind of don't want to hear?
The advice that I want to give myself honestly, the thing is waiting. It's waiting and being able to be in your awareness enough to recognize when too much outside noise is coming in. Like, I know I don't want to hear it and I say it all the time, but it wasn't until like recently where I actually did have to give myself that advice that I was like, you gotta stop. Like, you gotta recognize when you're pushing. Because even that far, like, I'll still have times where I don't wait for clarity. And then I make a decision because I'm trying to people please or whatever. And then I see how it bites me in the ass. And I'm like, this was one of those times. And so just the advice that I'm giving myself now is just wait. Like, if it's not an ooh, but your brain wants to give you all of the reasons why it should be a ooh, yes. Like, it's not. Like, your brain is trying to convince you it is, but it's not.
If it's, as one of my coaches loves to say, if it's not an absolute hell yes, then it's a hell no.
Yeah.
And that's not to make everything binary, but just to say, like, we have limited time on this plane of existence. And, if I said yes to everything, I'd be deeply unhappy, so I'm accepting that I can't do everything that I want to do in my life and in the years that I have. And knowing that I can probably more than fill up my time with just the hell yes, just the ooh feeling, right? Yeah. And so being willing, I love that advice, and I'm going to take some of that on myself. And if anybody's listening, I hope you do too. Or for everybody listening, is that there's no rush on a lot of this stuff. We often feel that like there's a rush, and that might be just this, like, I love how you're calling it like this external noise, this inner critic. But really examine, what would it take? I just had this thing happen where we have to like do some passport stuff with one of my kids, and my wife's like, okay, like let's get. And I was like, is there any reason why we shouldn't do this in January? And actually, we realized in that slowing down that if we tried to do this now, there's like actually much more risk, because of trips and different things would get screwed up. But if we wait, the risk actually goes way down, and the chances of success for this process goes way up. So that's slowing down. I love that advice. I want everyone to take it from this from this session. Um, but if people are interested in finding out now, I know we're going to put all the links in the show notes. But I know you've got is it a free human design? What tell
Chart
us about
pull.
what's on
Yeah.
your website on the chart? Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes. So on the website, you can pull your free human design chart and just start seeing how the information lands with you. I do send you some resources, a checklist, a video, like to get like better understanding.
Mm,
But that's usually the best way to connect with me is through the free chart pool. Of course, I'm on all the socials because
yeah,
branding is a thing that
because
I
brand.
do.
Well, so but I would really encourage anybody who's listening, or and is curious about anything that you've said. Just go check out the chart and just be an inquiry around it. I know you don't have to believe in any of the science about why it works. It's enough for me to say, here's this interesting take on me, my energy, my habits, my patterns, my behaviors. Let me just look at this and see if anything pops out to me. And I think something that's beautiful that you talked about is how much of that sort of codified what you already knew about yourself.
Hmm.
And you got to
Hmm.
go and you got to actually see it and go, okay, that's actually true. Now I can go and figure out which way I want to move forward from that knowledge. And you were able to make some big changes in your life and start to build this successful business. So what better result than that? And
Exactly.
here we are having this conversation. Um, I want to thank you so much for your time and your willingness to come join us on the show. I hope everyone goes and checks out your work, and thanks very much.
Thank you.
What did I tell you? It's a little bit woo. Not totally woo woo, but good stuff. What else I want to tell you is that we are about to launch our next Unleash Creativity Club. We are having a free open house on December 17th. If you missed that one because this episode is published after that date, which I still don't know, we're having another one in January. You can join our mailing list to get all these updates and more, including great tools from the club to really get a sense of what we do. I encourage you to sign up. It's free and we love sharing. So see you there.